The morning I found his jacket still hanging by the door, I almost called out his name. 2 years of doing that. 2 years of my hand reaching for the light switch in the bathroom and expecting to hear him shuffling around in the kitchen. 2 years of my daughter asking me questions I didn't know how to answer. I still hadn't moved the jacket. My name is Sarah. I'm 32 years old. I work as a pediatric nurse at a hospital in Columbus, Ohio. And 14 months ago, I finally stopped wearing my wedding ring not because I wanted to, but because my supervisor gently told me it was confusing the parents of my young patients when I introduced myself as their nurse and then started crying in the hallway. That's where I was. That's who I had become. My husband's name was Marcus. We met at a neighborhood barbecue. When I was 26, he spilled lemonade on my white sneakers and spent the rest of the afternoon apologizing and making me laugh so hard my stomach hurt. We got married 2 years later in a small ceremony at my parents' backyard in Cincinnati. My mother cried through the whole thing. My father shook Marcus's hand so hard Marcus winced. We had our daughter Emma when I was 29. She came into the world on a Tuesday morning in October, screaming, furious, and perfect. Marcus held her for the first time and didn't say a single word. He just looked at her like she had personally invented the concept of light. We were happy. I want to say that clearly, because what came after could make you forget it. We were genuinely, ordinarily, beautifully happy. Then, on a Wednesday evening in February, Marcus didn't come home from work. I remember the exact moment I started to worry. It was 6:47. Emma was in her high chair eating cut-up strawberries. I had sent him a text at 6:15 asking if he wanted pasta or chicken for dinner, and he hadn't responded, which was unusual but not alarming. By 6:47, the pasta was overcooked and the chicken was getting cold, and I had called his phone 3 times. Voicemail, voicemail, voicemail. By 8 o'clock, I had called his office. No answer. By 9, I had called his best friend, his mother, his brother. Nobody had heard from him. By 10:30, I had Emma asleep and I was sitting on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet, phone in my hand, trying to decide if I was being paranoid or if something was genuinely, terribly wrong. I called the police at 11. They were kind but measured. Adults go missing sometimes. Most of them turn up within 48 hours. They took a report. They said they'd look into it. 48 hours came and went. On the 3rd day, they found his car. It was parked near the edge of Alum Creek Reservoir, about 20 minutes outside the city. The door was unlocked. His phone was inside, his wallet, his keys. Everything that should have been with him was sitting in that car, and Marcus was not. The detective who came to my door had kind eyes and a careful voice. He explained that based on the location, the water, the personal effects left behind, they believed Marcus had gone into the reservoir. Possibly an accident, possibly not. They would investigate. They would search the water. They searched for 11 days. They never found a body. I don't have words for what those 11 days were like. I don't have words for the weeks after that either. I had a 20-month-old daughter who kept pointing at the front door every time she heard a car in the driveway. My mother moved in with me for 6 weeks. My father, a man who had never in my memory cried in front of another person, sat at my kitchen table one evening and put his face in his hands. Emma was too young to understand, but she knew something was wrong. She stopped sleeping through the night. She wanted to be held constantly. She called for Marcus, in her sleep not daddy, but dada. This soft, searching sound that made me feel like my chest was caving in every single time I heard it. 6 months after he disappeared, the court issued a presumptive death certificate. I won't describe what signing those papers felt like. I'll just say that I sat in my car in the parking lot of the courthouse for 45 minutes before I could drive. I tried to grieve. I tried to do everything right. Therapy, support groups, leaning on my family. I tried to keep things normal for Emma. I decorated for Halloween and Christmas and Easter. I took her to story time at the library on Saturday mornings. I packed her lunches with her favorite crackers and little notes with drawings of suns and cats. And I learned to stop reaching for the light switch and expecting to hear him in the kitchen. I learned to move the jacket. By the time Emma was almost 4, she understood that Daddy wasn't coming back. We had talked about it carefully, gently, in the way you talk to a small child about something enormous and incomprehensible. I told her that Daddy had gotten lost and wasn't able to find his way home, and that he had loved her more than anything in the world. She accepted this the way children accept impossible things completely, and then moved on to asking if we could have waffles. But then the questions started again, not the simple ones, the harder ones. Mommy, does Daddy remember what I look like? Mommy, if Daddy is in heaven, can he see Emma at school? Mommy, will I forget his face? That last one. I was driving her home from preschool on a Thursday afternoon when she asked it from the back seat, very quietly, in this utterly serious voice that 4-year-olds sometimes use when they're working through something too large for them. Will I forget his face? I pulled into our driveway and sat there with the engine running for a moment before I could answer her. No, baby, I said. We won't let that happen. We have pictures. We'll always have pictures. She seemed satisfied with that. She asked if we could have waffles again. We had waffles. But I lay awake that night thinking about the word forget, and I made a decision. I was going to take Emma somewhere new, somewhere we had never been as a family, somewhere with no ghosts. I had a friend from nursing school, Dana, who had moved to Portland, Oregon 2 years earlier. She had been asking me to visit for months. Emma had never seen the West Coast. I had vacation time saved up. I bought the tickets on a Sunday night after Emma was asleep. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and I bought 2 round-trip tickets to Portland. And I felt, for the first time in a very long time, something that wasn't grief. It was small and fragile, and I didn't want to name it too loudly, but it was there. I think it might have been hope. We flew out on a Friday morning in late September. Emma wore her favorite outfit, pink leggings, a shirt with a strawberry on it, light-up sneakers that she insisted on wearing, even though it was going to be a long travel day. She had a small backpack shaped like a turtle. She was so excited about the airplane that she talked about it non-stop from the moment we woke up until we actually boarded. And then the moment we sat down, she fell asleep on my arm before we even pushed back from the gate. I sat there in the quiet of the plane, with my daughter asleep against my shoulder, and I looked out the window at the tarmac and I thought, we are going to be okay. Then I heard Emma wake up. She had only been asleep for maybe 40 minutes. We were somewhere over the Midwest, the seatbelt sign still on, the flight attendants moving through the cabin with their drink carts. Emma lifted her head from my arm and blinked, disoriented, the way she always did when she woke from a short sleep. I expected her to ask for her juice box. I expected her to want her stuffed rabbit from her turtle backpack. Instead, she went very still. I noticed it because Emma is almost never still. She is a moving, talking, thinking creature from the moment she opens her eyes in the morning. So when she went still, I noticed. She was looking toward the back of the plane. Emma, I said, you okay, baby? She didn't answer me right away. She was staring at something over my shoulder, past me, toward the aisle. Her expression was strange, not frightened, but concentrated. Like she was trying to solve a problem. Emma, what is it? She turned and looked at me with those dark eyes that are identical to her father's eyes, and she said, in a voice so quiet, I almost didn't hear it over the engine noise. Mommy, that's Daddy. The world went very slow. I want to describe exactly what happened in my body in that moment, but I'm not sure I have the right words for it. It was like every system shut down at once and then tried to restart at the same time. My hands went cold. My vision got strange around the edges. What did you say? I whispered. That's Daddy. She pointed. Back there. He's sitting back there. Sweetheart. My voice came out wrong. Too careful. Too controlled. Daddy is gone. Remember what we talked about? I know, she said patiently, but that's Daddy. I told myself, she's 4. She sees a man who maybe looks similar. Children do this. It doesn't mean anything. I told myself that very firmly. And then I turned around. There were maybe a dozen rows behind us. The man was sitting in an aisle seat, 3 rows back, on the opposite side. He was wearing a gray jacket. He had a cup of coffee on his tray table. He was reading something on his phone. And my heart stopped. Not in a metaphorical way. In the way where I genuinely couldn't what? I had to grip the why. I had to grip the armrest to stay upright. Because it was Marcus. Not someone who looked like Marcus. Not a stranger with similar features who had caught my daughter's eye. It was my husband. My dead husband. The man whose presumptive death certificate I had signed in a courthouse parking lot. The man whose jacket I had finally moved from the hook by the door 8 months ago because I couldn't look at it anymore. He was sitting 3 rows behind me on a plane to Portland, Oregon, and he was very much alive. I turned back around. I stared at the seat in front of me. I breathed. Emma was watching my face. "Mommy?" "It's okay," I said. My voice didn't sound like my voice. "Just give Mommy 1 second, okay?" I turned around again. I needed to be sure. I needed to look at this person and see something that would tell me I was wrong, that I was a grieving woman who had lost her husband 2 years ago and was now projecting his face onto a stranger on an airplane, which was a completely understandable thing to do. He looked up, and he saw me. I watched it happen the moment he registered my face. There was no confusion, no polite blankness of a stranger trying to figure out why a woman was staring at him. There was recognition, immediate and total, and right behind it, something that looked exactly like dread. He knew me. Of course he knew me. He knew me because I was his wife. We looked at each other across 3 rows of seats on a plane traveling at 35,000 feet, and neither of us moved. Then he looked away. He deliberately, consciously, looked away from me and down at his phone. I turned back around. My hands were shaking. Emma had gone back to her rabbit. I sat there for what might have been 3 minutes or 15. I genuinely have no idea, just staring at the headrest in front of me and trying to understand what I was supposed to do with what I had just seen. My husband was alive. He was 3 rows behind me. He had looked me in the eye and then looked away. And then I thought, what do I actually do right now? We were on a plane. We were in the air. There was nowhere to go. I couldn't call the police. I couldn't walk out. I was in a metal tube 35,000 feet above the ground with my 4-year-old daughter and the husband I had buried. I thought about Emma. She had turned back to her rabbit and seemed to have already moved into a different thought entirely, the way children do. I needed to not fall apart in front of her. Whatever I was going to do, I needed to do it without falling apart in front of my 4-year-old. I unbuckled my seatbelt. "I'll be right back, baby," I said. "I'm going to use the restroom." She nodded without looking up from her rabbit. I walked back down the aisle. My legs were doing it on their own because I'm not sure my brain was fully connected to them. I stopped at his row. He didn't look up. "Marcus," I said. He looked up. His face was a complicated thing. There was no shock he'd had 3 rows and several minutes to prepare himself. There was something that might have been shame. Something that might have been relief. Something that was definitely fear. "Sarah," he said quietly. The sound of his voice saying my name nearly broke me in half. I had not heard that voice in 2 years. I had not heard him say my name in 2 years. I had spent 2 years learning to live in the silence where that voice used to be. "You are going to explain this to me," I said. Very quietly, very steadily. "Not here, not now. But when we land, you are going to explain every single thing." He nodded. He looked like a man who had known this moment was coming and had been waiting for it to arrive. "Okay," he said. "Okay, I will." I walked back to my seat. Emma was asleep again by the time we landed. We met at a coffee shop near the airport. I texted Dana to please come pick up Emma at arrivals and explained there was something I needed to handle. Dana, who has known me since we were 21, asked no questions and showed up exactly when I needed her to. Marcus and I sat across from each other at a small table by the window. He had coffee. I had nothing. I couldn't imagine swallowing anything. I let him talk. He talked for a long time. The short version, the version stripped of all his explanations and justifications, which I want to be clear I am not endorsing, is this. Marcus had made a series of financial decisions in the 2 years before he disappeared. Bad ones. He had invested money we didn't have in a business venture with someone he trusted who turned out to not be trustworthy at all. He was in significant debt. He was also, he told me, in a relationship with someone he had met through that business, a woman named Claire. He had been planning to leave me. But instead of leaving me, which would have meant facing the debt and the conversation and the consequences, he had driven to Alum Creek Reservoir and staged his own death. He had moved to Portland. He had been living there for 2 years. He had a job. He had an apartment. He was, he said, still with Claire. He had a life. A whole, complete, functional life. Somewhere else. Under a different name. I listened to all of this. I let him get through all of it. And then I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest since the moment I'd turned around on that plane. Did you ever think about Emma? He couldn't look at me when I asked it. He looked at the table. He said yes. He said he thought about her every day. He said there wasn't a day that went by that he didn't think about what he had done. I want to make it right, he said. I want to be in her life. I know I don't deserve that. But if there's any way, you committed fraud, I said. You filed a fraudulent death claim. The life insurance paid out, Marcus. We lived on that money for 8 months. You made our daughter an orphan so that you could avoid a difficult conversation. He was quiet. I'm going to give you one opportunity to do the right thing, I said. You're going to turn yourself in. You're going to contact a lawyer, and then you're going to turn yourself in to the appropriate authorities, and you're going to sort out every legal consequence of what you did. And you are not going to contact Emma, not through me, not through anyone until that process is complete, and a judge has made a decision about what role, if any, you should have in her life? He asked me if I would ever forgive him. I thought about that question for a long moment. I thought about the 45 minutes I spent in the courthouse parking lot. I thought about Emma asking if she would forget his face. I thought about my father putting his face in his hands at my kitchen table. I don't know, I said. But that's not the most important question right now. I stood up. I picked up my bag. The most important question, I said, is whether you're going to be the person who does the right thing for his daughter, even 2 years too late. I walked out of the coffee shop and I called Dana, and I told her I was on my way. Marcus did contact a lawyer. I know this because the lawyer contacted me 3 weeks later as part of the process. The legal proceedings took several months and are ongoing. The insurance company is involved. The fraud charges are real. I have given my own statement to authorities and cooperated fully with everything they've asked. I don't know what the outcome will look like. I don't know if Marcus will face jail time or fines or some combination of both. I don't know what a judge will decide about his relationship with Emma. What I know is this. I flew home from Portland on a Tuesday afternoon with my daughter asleep on my arm again, and I looked out the window at the clouds, and I thought about the word okay. We had been okay before. We would be okay again. Not the same okay, a different okay. One that had been broken and reset and would carry the mark of that forever. Emma woke up just before we landed. She looked out the window at the city below us and said, "Mommy, are we home?" "Yes, baby," I said. "We're home." She pressed her nose against the window. "Is Daddy going to be there?" I took a breath. "No, sweetheart. Daddy isn't going to be there." She considered this. She looked at me with those dark, serious eyes. "But he's real," she said. "He's not in heaven. He's real." "Yes," I said, because she deserved the truth, even the parts I didn't know how to explain yet. "He is." She nodded like she was filing this information away somewhere. Then she looked back out the window. "Okay," she said. And she pointed at the runway coming up to meet us and she said, "Look, Mommy, we're almost there." We were.